Good afternoon. It is the October the 8th edition of the THCB Gang. I am Matthew Holt, your host and producer and founder and publisher of THCB at BolTV on Twitter. And I've got a great lineup with me today. All being drowned out by the fact that I'm having a sewer built outside, which is one of those things that comes of working not in your home studio. Who's on today? So a couple of token males with me, Kim Bellard, ex-editor of Tincture and a regular contributor to THCB, Ian Morrison, health futurist at Second Curve on Twitter. And then the main event is we have three wonderful female participants, Robin von Fanfanian, author of The Patient as CEO and these days co-founder of Face Touch Aware, Jane Saracen-Khan, health economist from Think Health and the Health Populi blog, Jess DeMassa, my co-host on WTF Health, and Casey Quinlan from Mighty Casey Media. Did I say three? I meant four. Mm-hmm. All right, fantastic. So let's go live.
Replicating females.
I'm replicating females. And before we start, because Jess is on, I have to be a good boy. And for the first time, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the healthcare blog, who include Livongo, Teladoc, who I guess will be one company soon, Guy Well, and OneDrop. Did I do all right, Jess?
Perfect.
All right, very good. There you go. Crash commercialization is now over. Wow. So hi, everyone. It has been a couple of weeks since we've been on. I took a break last week because obviously nothing happened then. And I am reminded, some of you may have heard Bob Wachter and his UCSF Ground Rounds did like a 90-minute expose of every single thing you could possibly know about, you know, with a bunch of UCSF wonky doctors about testing, tracing, treatment, spread of disease, everything else around the Trump sort of, I'm fine, I'm going to go spread it amongst Joe Biden, a bunch of people, a bunch of supporters between Tuesday, Thursday. I go to hospital, I come out of hospital, I drive around in my limousine and God knows what else. It's been a crazy time. So that's obviously a big thing this week and a bunch of other stuff. Let's go around the horn and find what have you been paying attention to? I'll start with you, Robin.
So I have been paying attention to NEMT, non-emergency medical transport, because recently Uber just partnered with Epic. I'm sorry, Lyft partnered with Epic, Uber partnered with Cerner. And so now through the EMRs, you can actually order a Uber or a Lyft for your patient. And the patient doesn't have to have a smartphone or anything. It's just all done through the EMR system, which is very cool. And of course, NEMT is a $3 billion a year industry. And this is being reimbursed, by the way, by CMS.
Interesting. I saw on Lyft money. Kim, what do you notice the last week or so?
Well, the thing that I don't think people have talked enough about with the president's hospitalization, that as much as the Republicans rail against what they say Joe Biden's trying to do, he got all of his care in not only a government-run system, but a government staff system. So what's good for the goose isn't good for the gander, apparently.
Socialized medicine for the very, very rich, or maybe not that rich, depending on that.
And it didn't cost him a dime, of course. So even more.
Well, he may have paid $750 a year into the pool. We don't know. Jessica, what have you seen the last week or so that's caught your fancy?
The circus that is health tech funding. Rock Health came out with their report for Q3, $4 billion in Q3 alone in health tech funding. To put that into perspective, all of last year was 7.4 billion. So they're projecting that it's going to be about 12 if we keep pace. And that doesn't count all of the IPOs that we're hearing about. So yeah, things are getting exciting. Words like SPAC, special purpose acquisition company, are coming into our vocabulary. And then my favorite, takeout speculation. That's probably the phrase of the week for me. And that refers to United Health Group perhaps purchasing Amwell, that big rumor.
So Jane, spread that rumor to me.
Yeah, she did, Jane.
That is hedge fund scumminess to the height, if you ask me.
Oh my God, but I love it. But my source on that was Jane Saracen-Khan, so let's let her answer.
All right. Casey, what do you see the last week or so?
Oh, I don't know. It's just all the same crazy train. As said earlier, my friend Eric Paraxlis put it in a blog post recently that 2020 is like speed dating the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That has not changed. As someone who spent a number of years decades in the television news business, I will say that the 24-hour news cycle does make things difficult on an average day, but I don't think we've had an average day since sometime in 2015 when strange people came down an escalator in New York and shit got cray. So, you know, I mean, I don't know, because I'm an old news hound, I have a landscape that's probably a lot wider than many of the people on this call. But for me, the healthcare thing, is Sarah Cliff broke down how much Trump's care at Walter Reed would have cost if it was in, you know, the public health delivery system, not Walter Reed. And it's up there in the numbers of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he certainly did get value received on that $750 tax bill, didn't he? I'll just leave that line there.
Ian.
Well, I'll just say this phrase out loud: Donald Trump on steroids. I mean, that's just.
I know, right?
You know, I mean, you alluded to the UCSF thing. George Rutherford, you know, the epidemiologist on Grand Rounds, he said when he was on a course of steroids, he wanted to go out and buy a boat, you know, and I it's like, you know, you need to take the car keys away from him. That's as far. And, you know, as a Scot, I keep coming back to the fact that he doesn't drink. I mean, he does this and he's not drinking. Can you imagine if he was drinking and drunk tweeting? Oh, God damn.
Well, there is that question about Adderall.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I did say to somebody, I was going back and forth with Anish Kokra, somebody on this show, who's probably the only right-wing cardiologist I know. And he had a thing where he said, I said, well, what happens if you mix the steroid with Adderall? And he wrote back and said, he've got a link. And I sent him the picture of Sarah Cooper doing the I don't do drugs, the drug test, where she ends up with like white powder all over her face. All right. Jane.
Say hello to my little friend. Yeah.
Jane.
Well, I first have to say how much I love being with you all, because I have my head down.
We love you being here. So glad you're back.
Love all. I love all of you. Every day something. So I'm just gonna say today my favorite thing is the New England Journal of Medicine editorial, "Dying in a Leadership Vacuum." New England Journal has never been this politically out, and
they didn't name him though.
They basically say throw the bums out. It's just it's history making to me.
Totally.
So for me, that's sort of angels singing.
So there's a lot there, but I think we have to dive into, you know, the implications that came up in the debate last night, and not as much as I thought. But there are two things going on, right, on parallel tracks. Right? One is, what is the way we are handling it? The country is handling the current set of sort of shutdown, re-upping. I'm noticing some of the numbers ticking up internationally, particularly. The Irish apparently are thinking about going back on the full lockdown, and they were one of the first countries to go properly in lockdown compared to the Brits. And the Brits are having outbreaks in the north of the country, I've noticed. And then obviously, you know, the US was still seeing stuff all over the place. And then compare and contrast with the fact that, you know, the one little bit I did tune into last night where Pence got asked, I think by the moderator, what about, you know, the Supreme Court considering the Affordable Care Act on November the 10th and potentially abolishing it? And all he said was, well, the Democrats are going to pack the court. He completely avoided his own question. So we've got these two things coming up, right? We've got to manage the transition. We have no stimulus package, which, you know, I'm sure Ian will get into. And then we've got this issue of the Affordable Care Act coming up for judicial review and possibly being thrown out. And somewhere in the middle of that, Amy Coney Barrett probably being for the force fit into her seat in the next weeks, days. So who wants to start? Because there's a lot in there.
I wouldn't want to give, you know, like strong odds that she's going to get confirmed. Not yet. Given the fact that they're on break until next week, the Senate, and possibly longer. I don't know. This year has been so crazy. I'm leery of making any strong predictions about X or Y or whatever. But I would not say that it's a done deal that Amy Coney Barrett, whatever her name is going to end up on the Supreme Court. But I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, I would just push back and say, all you care about, the reason the evangelical and the Republican base, one of them has been so strong with Trump, is that he's prepared to do what they say, you know, and take the list from the Federalist Society about who to appoint to courts. So it's not just the Supreme Court, it's all the way down the district courts,
Yeah.
which is why we got this crazy ruling in the first place on Texas v. California or whatever. Is it called California v. Texas now? One of my legal analysts on this call will help me out with the right name, but it's the one reconsidering it. I gotta say, I don't see anything amongst the Senate Republicans not wanting to put her on the court. Romney said he's going to do it. I mean, maybe Collins will back off this time. I doubt it. She's going to lose anyway. She's at the point that she doesn't care. Same with the woman's name. I'm just with the senator from Arizona. His name I forgot.
Murkowski, you mean?
Murkowski, thanks.
The thing that could push it back is if some Senate Republicans have to quarantine themselves so they can't get a majority to vote. I mean, they can't do virtual votes in the Senate. So
who will force them to actually quarantine themselves?
And one said he would wear a hazmat suit to make the vote.
What, is he going to
Literally,
borrow it from
wrap
Matt
himself up.
Gates? Yeah, Matt Gates wore,
The gas mask, right?
The best line I thought that Kamala had yesterday in response to the otherwise weak answers about packing the courts, when she said, they've been packing the courts. And by the way, not only are some of them unqualified by their peers, but only, I think one of them has been black, maybe not even one of them black. But I wish that she had pushed through that point to say, like, where are the black jurists? Where are the black administration officials? Really get that out there that, you take any picture in the Trump White House and it's all white men.
well, good luck with Susan Page pushing back on her friends.
Well, there is that.
That moderator was terrible.
So let's move on a bit from the debate, but I want to talk a little bit more about what do you think the response is going to be in the next few months, sort of politically, in the discussion about this. I keep on hearing everyone saying, the Republicans saying we're opposed to pre-existing conditions. I think I've said this before. I think what Trump thinks is he's abolishing cancer. He's abolishing, he doesn't like the concept of cancer and God knows what else. But the problem is, right, we've got to play this out. There is obviously politics around this. Looks like Biden's taking a big lead, partly over the last debate and maybe over the Trump hospitalization piece. But we don't have a stimulus bill, which I think is amazing, given that it's a month coming up before the election. They didn't even, they're not prepared to push that through to try and save themselves a little bit. What do we think the impact is going to be on maybe not just the Supreme Court analysis of the ACA, but on what people are thinking about and talking about in the politics of healthcare in the next few weeks? So Jane, you look at this a lot, and Ian, you look at this a lot. Both you guys could chime in.
Well, I couldn't believe last night Pence did get away with saying, don't pack the court, when in fact 4 years later there still isn't a plan. I don't know what the plan is, and Trump wasn't even able to lower prescription drug prices, which he promised in his Time magazine interview when he was Man of the Year before he took office. Drug companies are murderers, he said. So that he's gotten away with this all these years, I don't know. I think, what Ian taught us, the most about scenario planning, and there are still some wild cards to be thrown out in the next 3 weeks, because every single day it's like another nuclear small n thing. So to your point, Matthew, it's hard to predict. I think in the short run, people are broke. It is a K recovery, V blah, blah, blah. And the fact is people are very angry now. So I just came to this call listening to my ex-home state, Michigan's governor, talking about the fact she almost got kidnapped by militias. And they've known about this since April, apparently. People are angry, and there's some nasty stuff brewing underneath. So I honestly don't know what to say about healthcare, when in fact there is this animus, this anomie and animus in the public, that's in the body politic, that's really cancerous. And things could erupt in wild ways in the next couple of weeks, which is why I want to be on this call 2 weeks from today, a few days before the election, because I think we're going to know more in the next 14 days from Trump shedding. Will he show up next week to the debate? Now he says he won't because it's virtual. There's so many big things to wait out. I don't even think we can talk about healthcare. I think it's more visceral. It's financial, illness, unwellness, and then still so much brewing in on the street. So I can't even think about healthcare right now. I mean, tomorrow my blog will be about the Kaiser Family Foundation Employee Benefits Survey. And basically it's the same number this year as it was last year, 4% increase in cost. But KFF is quick to say, we conducted this from January to June, and we don't know what the heck's going to happen in terms of post-pandemic insurance next year. And Ian studies this a lot with you. You talk about this a lot with your clients, Ian, so you could pick it up from here and talk about healthcare.
Well, yeah, I think Casey was trying to jump in though. Do you want to go?
I was just going to make an observation about the fact that the health of the republic is more at stake than any individual American's health is at this point. Not to say that an individual American's health is not highly at risk, both from the coronavirus and the fact that we still don't have any kind of sensible national approach to healthcare or public health or health policy. But the real health risk right now is to the republic itself. So stay tuned for updates.
Yeah.
Half of Americans don't think it's going to be a fair election, and some startlingly high number thought there might be a civil war after the election. So,
well, I saw a number that 30% of Americans on all sides now felt that violence was acceptable as a way to promote their viewpoint. All right.
Acceptable? Oh gosh.
Now we've gone to revolutions are us.
Yeah.
Come back, brings back to
Well,
health.
no, I think
Who's on steroids on this call?
Yes. Jane got it right. I mean, Roy Amara, our old mentor, used to teach us that don't substitute error for uncertainty. If you don't know, you don't know, right? And I think that's wise. But I think, we've touched on the key things, that there is huge vulnerability given the Supreme Court. I think she gets on like absent some earth-shattering event, and we can never rule that out. And there's a non-zero probability. It's the neutron bomb that's out there because they don't have a plan. And they couldn't come up with one. I mean, in talking to some of the Washington insiders on the Democratic side recently, they feel that there are fixes that could be made to right that ship if they have control of the Senate within limit. But I think it's horribly chaotic. But I think you're all pointing to the key fact. The next run up to the election. I mean, the thing I've been focused on this week actually is Disney's layoffs. As just a metaphor for what's going on. And I reached out to my pals at Disney and got a sort of inside scoop on the story there. I mean, essentially about 30,000 people are being laid off. It's all about the theme parks, but the theme park in Florida is actually open. The theme park in California is closed, right? So that's disproportionately 3/4 of it's going to happen in California. And, only about 13,000 of that 30 had benefits. The rest were part-timers. And my sources are saying most of those people will be in SoCal and most of those people will be Kaiser members. I mean, I've been working with Kaiser Permanente Medical Group this week on their internal meeting. And that's a big deal for them. It's like 8,000 members, like poof. So I think that's an illustration of the fact that the economy has been on the equivalent of a ventilator. And to your point, everybody's going to get thrust out into, unless the Congress acts. And that, I think what Trump's using is leverage, to use his word, up to the election. So it's horrible. And the real tragedy is people are going to get hurt badly. And I think is going to be a motivator for people to go to the polls. But, I can't think of a scenario where this is easy. Let me put it that way.
Do we think collectively that there's understanding? Has it been enough? I mean, there's so much noise of every kind, as we know. And, take California. Ian, do you know the number? What share of the population's on Medicaid now? How many?
Well, it's 30%. It's 30%. It's 12 million people.
Expansion.
It's 30%.
So if the AC gets rolled back, I mean, that's the safety net basically in California for so the 8,000 or whatever number of Disney employees who are going to lose their coverage are going to go on to Medicaid, probably Medi-Cal, probably. That kind of thing. I'm wondering, you're talking about. I mean, Biden did say there were 20 odd million people who are going to lose their insurance. I'm just wondering if people are sort of twigging about what's going on around the Barrett appointment and whether they really understand the ACA is sort of up for review, let alone
again,
nothing will happen till June. Kim?
They're only hearing the arguments at the beginning of November. You won't hear the announcement until next year sometime. So there theoretically could be time to pass a bill if you got the House and the Senate and the presidency, in it. But the question is, could you implement that bill in time for there not to be gaps? Which that's the part I'm very skeptical of.
Well, you'd have to blow this. I mean, because at max they're going to pick up. I mean, we know this is all up in the air. And there are three pretty obvious Senate gains, and there's one lost, right? You're going to lose Alabama, probably, and you're almost certainly going to gain Colorado, Arizona, and Maine. And then there's a bunch that, like North and South Carolina and Iowa and whatever that could go either way. And we were all, the Democratic side, sitting here 4 years ago going, oh, that's no problem. We'll have Hillary and the Senate. And then we lost, the Democrats lost a bunch of the ones they thought they were going to win. And then we ended up with Trump and McConnell running the thing, and two, now perhaps three conservatives on the Supreme Court. It seems to me that, yes, you could thread the needle. You could pass something, you could kill the filibuster, you could pass the comprehensive bill if you got 51 seats, but even so, you've got to convince, like that Senator mentioned from West Virginia, to actually do something much more. I mean, it was pretty hard to get it through when they had 60 votes. So I'm still, circumstances are tough, but I'd love to hear other comments about how likely it is that they're going to be able to do it. Let's assume that the ACA stays and Biden wins and they win the Senate. The stuff they've been talking about in terms of lowering Medicare and doing a public option, I mean, how likely do you think that is?
Not in the first 100 days. I mean, they may lay the groundwork, but the priority in the first 100 days, I think, is going to be pandemic response, writing that and getting through the vaccine chaos, and also doing whatever necessary to maintain the bottom third of the income distribution from being, thrown out of their homes.
So if you take that, I mean, I think you're probably right. I mean, if ACA stands, Barrett on the court or not, and that, ruling or no ruling, but January, February, whenever they come out with it, and they just leave it as is and they don't go off the healthcare for a while. Now let's flip the other way. Let's say that now the ruling comes out and it's late January, early February, and there is now no ACA. Do they flip that around and do something about the ACA? And what could they do?
Well, Kim, maybe you have a sense of the timetable. I was told it was sort of like April or May before they would actually rule.
I don't know what would be expected, but there is a lag. But even something like if they just pass a new Medicaid expansion, you have to promulgate rules and do all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can't, a bill like that, you can't just say, I'm passing it and then tomorrow it's in effect. They're just way too complicated to do.
Right.
Well, it took them 6 months to roll out Medicare.
You gotta remember, we had $1 trillion annual before COVID, and now we've added, $4 trillion more to that.
Right.
If Biden gets control of all of Congress, he's going to be operating with his hands tied behind his back about what he's going to be able to spend money on, because there's no money. We're way in debt.
Yeah, Trump gave away the store with that tax cut in, 2017, 2018? And he gave away the store, and that cascades down through states to, localities. Everybody's broke. I don't know where the money is going to come from to pick up the tab just on what's happened so far, because everybody's playing robbing Peter to pay Paul, or some kind of prestidigitation type of economics. But sooner or later, the chickens are going to come home to roost. Hospitals are going to be closing because nobody paid them. It's just the cascade knock-on effects here are going to be terrible, and we're only seeing the very beginning of this. This is going to go on for years. So
I don't understand why the Republicans have been so opposed to the House wanting to do state and local aid. They have to be suffering the same kind of damage as states do. And aren't they hearing from their governors, from their mayors about, the financial things? And, those are policemen and firemen and nurses and all sorts of people that, they claim that they support.
You have mistakenly thought that they actually meant anything that they said from the top guy. I'm not saying, that middle tier Republicans are all in the same boat that he is, but every single one of the chaos monkeys that's close to the White House is great at giving lip service about, you know, helping the American person, but it really is all about making sure that they've gotten the drapes and they've pulled the paintings off the wall and they've sold off all the silver. And, you know, the kleptocracy is reigning right now because I think they know they're in trouble and they're going to leave us with a hell of a mess.
I live in a red state and we're $1 billion in the hole at the state level and all kinds. You know, DeWine has got to be talking important to Trump about, you know, we need money. And that's got to multiply that, you know, 20 times, but it have no impact in terms of their willingness to move on the deal.
No, I think it's astonishing that McConnell wouldn't move on the deal even before Trump, well, the other night came out and said that he was, you know, not going to do it and then maybe was going to do it. But, you know, it's still, if you look at other countries, there have been much more rational programs for supporting small business and, you know, paying people for paying people.
I mean,
for
these are all
food and-
self-inflicted wounds.
Well, the whole thing was self-inflicted because if you go back now, it's clear that even Trump knew the potential of the coronavirus back in the you know, back in all those Bob Woodward takes back in February and March, and just wasn't prepared to do anything about it.
January was when he got that briefing.
Right. So we had that. So okay, so now we're all depressed about that. Let's change topics a little bit and go talk about some of the things that Robin and Jess brought up in the opening there, which is the sort of this, how do we figure this huge amount of venture capital money and spending that is going into these new types of tools and technologies that both of you picked up on, you know, whether it's Lyft integrating itself into the EMR system, or, you know, just a huge amount of spend that we've seen, Jess, that we feature on Health in 2.0. How do you two feel that is sort of playing in this health system, which, you know, the rest of the panelists now thinks it's about to be underwater and underfunded and maybe you know, dying horribly? Give me a sense of how you think that's going to start playing out over the next few months, because clearly the people spending money in that think there is money coming back to them somehow, somewhere.
So, so from my point of view, we're starting to see a lot of these remote patient monitoring devices, some of these virtual care devices and virtual care platforms like Amwell, really bringing the healthcare experience into the home. And they believe it's going to pay off because CMS is already reimbursing, right? So CMS reimburses for remote patient monitoring. They've got a number of codes out there. The insurers, while like United, they had the free copay. Now you have to have a small copay, but still it's tiny, right? And so it's being able to get to the patients, get reimbursement. And when you can do both of those things and you're reliable, they are going to make their money back.
I guess from my point of view, I keep thinking about this, and I think the irony of this all is the question. It's like, are voters who are upset about what's going to potentially happen to healthcare if Trump stays in office, if they show up, will it be healthcare that brings down Trump? Or if the other side shows up, will it be Trump that brings down healthcare? And I think that as far as the market is concerned, we know from looking at the stock market likes the stimulus package, but no idea on how the Affordable Care Act is, whether it stays or whether it goes, or whether, I mean, I would imagine things would go, I would imagine things would be better off if that stays and if Biden gets elected, right? As far as venture capital is concerned, if I were to guess, I feel like, I don't know, Matthew, what do you think? I mean, I just feel like the investing the last couple of weeks has been insane. Just the size of the deals, the amount of the deals, the things that have gotten invested in, the number of companies that are planning to go public, like right quick here. I almost wonder if there's going to be a period of time here, kind of almost like a quiet period over the next couple of weeks until we see where things land. And then I think it's going to be a flurry to spend money through the end of the year to either take advantage of what the speculation is going to be if the Affordable Care Act stays, or to fill in the gaps of what's going to happen if it ends up going. And I think we're going to see some of these companies who have made big, bold moves, taking care of people in the absence of federal leadership during COVID-19, step in. So I do some work with CVS, and it's just like they've got their own strategy. And it's like, hey, we're trying to work with the federal government. We're trying to work with states. We're trying to work with these people. But regardless, the retail machine is going to move along, and either you're on the bandwagon with us or you're not. And so I think we're going to see more of that if the ACA does not, if it is repealed, or if Trump ends up being reelected.
Before we go to
Let me
Casey, I'm
ask
just
you a
like, Casey,
question.
just before we go to you, I just want to point out
Everybody's
that.
argue with me.
No. I'm all arguing.
No, it's
I
not
just
an
want to say that
argument,
I just want to say that we did a Health in 2.0 where Jess had socks, docks, what was it? Raccoons? I forget the categories. It was
Last week, $250 million were invested in fitness mirrors. Mirrors that teach you how to work out. 250 million, 900 million in a Series A for a physical therapy app where raccoons teach you how to do your PT exercises. Raccoons with their little hands. I don't know
this
what's
entire
happening.
episode. I'm just laughing. I didn't say anything. I just sat there laughing the whole episode.
Well, I mean,
Casey, sorry.
there's a phrase from the industry I was in before I ended up pivoting into healthcare called jump the shark. And I do have a feeling that that particular one jumped the raccoon. We'll see about that. But my question is, as much as retail can certainly step in and fill a lot of these gaps, no argument there at all. But for the lower third of humans in America who have lost their, how is this going to help them?
It's
and
not,
right
it's
now, I mean, it's like I see nothing but tumbrils and freaking guillotines coming for a lot of these people who think that, raccoons can teach. Well, anyway, raccoons, really? But there's attack raccoons at the White House now. I mean, no, seriously, go Google it. And when I say attack, they're attacking. It's not like somebody in the Secret Service is having them attack, but the press corps is under attack by wild raccoons. I kid you not, for the stand-ups out on the lawn. But anyway, I question whether or not the entire concept of America as it was, as it exists in people's heads hasn't jumped the shark somehow, because we're always leaving people behind. We're always ignoring entire swaths of our populace, all of our citizens. Well, you got to be white. You got to have money. How's that working out? Not so good.
Have you read Cased yet?
Go ahead.
Isabel Wilkerson.
Have I read who?
Cased by Isabel Wilkerson.
Cast.
Cast.
Cast, not case. It doesn't rhyme with paste.
Cast.
Cast.
Sorry.
No, I have not. Although I did read Warmth of
amazing.
Other Suns.
Can I play tag off of what
Please.
Robin and Jessica were talking about? And I'm all retail health all the time, a lot. And I think vaccines and lots of good things happen closer to home. But the sector that I'm worried about, and I know Ian thinks about this a lot, is in the fourth quarter, 50% of US hospitals will have negative margins based on the Kaufman Hall study they did for AHA. And over the next year, we've had a lot of hospitals already going under and more announcements going on. And until we figure out sort of this reimbursement and payment and get to value-based care, where a lot of this stuff can help moving people to the home, what is the reimagined role of a hospital bed or all that capital that's in hospitals that then, has jobs outside of the hospitals? In my town of Philadelphia, we got 6 medical schools still, and 5, Hoddeman's not there anymore. But, all the businesses around that and the local economies that are driven by hospital-based healthcare, the macroeconomics of this are huge, and the employment impacts. So I think we have to figure out how do we play with hospitals that can survive and maybe thrive again in all of this, because this sector is going to be hit so hard, and then the knock-on effects of that.
Let me jump in and say, because I want to something that Ian taught me 30 years ago. Not quite 30 years ago, 25 years ago, was that there's no one hospital sector, right? There's a bunch of high-end hospitals, there's a bunch in the middle, and there's a bunch that struggle. The margin differential between, MD Anderson, the Mayo Clinic, and the HCA hospitals out in the rich suburbs, compared to the inner city hospitals, the rural ones, the margin differentials are worse than the differentials we're seeing in the stock market and business between. Look at the price of Amazon stock in recent months versus the damn shopping malls that I invested in cleverly. So I think there's a mass distinction there. But what we have talked about, right, what Jess is talking about and Ron is talking about, is companies coming in who are intending to go around hospitals.
Right.
And we still have a lot of investment, a lot of money in people who could benefit from that, particularly Medicare Advantage plans, and the other insurers. And what Jane's saying is we have no transition plan either for the chaos that we're about to visit on hospitals, maybe with and out an ACA or with it, but in terms of the pain we've put them through, although we did actually give them a lot of money. We gave them $150 billion with no strings attached, not straight to the right hospitals during the CARES Act, but we gave them a lot of money to go through this. But nonetheless, we put them through a lot of pain dealing with COVID. And we haven't really got any thoughts about what's a rational transition plan to the fact that maybe we all get our primary care at Walmart and they're working with Clover and which insurance companies and others to prevent us going to hospital. And maybe that's all great in Wongdon theory, but as Jane points out, that has a big knock-on effect to the actual economics of where we spend the $1 trillion+ we spend on hospitals now. So these things are all interconnected, and nobody, I mean, even from the Democratic side, is anyone hearing a kind of plan for how this is going to work?
Well, just to build on this conversation, I mean, I've spent most of the last couple of months with doing hospital board retreats remotely and talking with these guys. That Jane's right that, the Kaufman Hall numbers of many hospitals are going to be underwater, but 2/3 of American healthcare is integrated, large IDNs that dominate the market, right? And what I'm hearing from the CEOs is that this pandemic has sort of proved out financial strength and scale, so it's either the really big boys who have got deep pockets and or people who have little regional monopolies that can charge very high prices, and they're doing fine. And in actual fact, if you get inside the finances of these guys, and I'm sitting listening to the finance committees, that they're going to lose money for the year, but not that much. I mean, because they restarted the elective engine. Even places like Miami that were in the midst of a pandemic in July were running double team elective surgery and COVID simultaneously. I mean, it wasn't like New York. So, I think they have an issue. And then you bring all the Jess stuff, these new entrants whose job is to basically take business away from them. So they're freaking out about that, to be sure. And you're right, it's all connected. I mean, the good news is if you could get those systems to intelligently partner and support it with value-based reimbursement, where it was a win-win, where we spend less money and we get better care and we're more consumer friendly. That to me is the goal we should be trying to fight for, but I suspect we'll not get to that happy place. There'll be a lot of tripping over each other.
Yeah, we have Casey.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to say this is where, hubris but we've always done it this way meets reality. There have been ways historically to, sort of hide the salami when it comes to how badly something is impacting your bottom line if you are a hospital of whatever size. But the one big warning sign that I always say, sort of the cautionary tale, if you will, is what happened to St. Vincent's Hospital Medical Center, and Hospital and Medical Center in New York, which that was all hubris. That was all hubris and just really, really, really dumbassery. Because I know people who were inside the castle, and it was beyond belief, beggar's belief, what went on there. And that was in better times. So, I mean, granted, yes, the larger system.
Those who aren't following along, what happened? Just give us the story.
Well, what happened was they over leveraged themselves, sort of taking the real estate that they had in Lower Manhattan and using it as, sort of, what's the word? Suddenly my brain isn't working. It's collateral. Thank you. Using the real estate they had as collateral to leverage all kinds of weird deals. And the fact that they had nonprofit status, they thought because it was a Catholic system, they thought they could get away with it. They ended up taking it and rocket up the shorts on some tax decisions, and it just went from there. And they're now, I mean, I think the big hospital building is condos now, which here's my thing that I've been saying for probably a decade now, is that the hospitals that have big real estate portfolios that are now wondering, like, what the hell do we do with them? Turn them into community health hubs. You turn them into communities. If you've got buildings that aren't necessarily getting used for imaging anymore, can you turn them into housing for your frequent flyers? I think that there's a lot of opportunity here that people aren't really thinking of, because we've all, we're all like, right now looking at the row we're hoeing, because it's like everything's on fire. But I do think that there's some percentage in trying to reinvent hospital buildings as something else. Because the old model of the hospital is, the giant building where everybody goes to get healthcare. Who wants to go into the virus building now? Nobody.
Right.
So
I'd say that. So just as the minor thing, if you didn't see, there's those watching the ProPublica article on which was out about a week ago on Prospect Medical, which is the sort of small chain in Los Angeles that was basically supplying providing for Medi-Cal patients, was taken over by a private equity group called Leonard Green that stripped out for sort of $400 million. And in the end, they went to a bunch of other, they spread to a bunch of other places like Connecticut and Rhode Island and Texas, and they destroyed a bunch of other hospitals within the same thing. And in the end, of course, what did they do? They did, their final payout was to sell all the land and lease it back to the hospitals. They stripped some more money out, and now they're all basically in
it's sort of Neutron Jack's GE approach.
It was the Neutron Jack scenario. So that's still going on, kind of at the low end. And as we talked on this show about before, we've had a lot of private equity groups coming to other areas like, medical groups and radiology groups and that kind of stuff, as well as hospitals. It's all okay, I think, to say that we're going to make this transition and we've got to figure it out. But I'm back to my question, my statement. Maybe no one disagrees with me, so I think I must be right. I don't see a thought about how such a big sector of the economy is going to transition. There is actually some rational stuff in some of the Biden plan about transitioning other sectors of the economy, talking about new energy and renewables and that kind of stuff, and how you would do that. We hear discussions like that about some other areas, transportation. I haven't heard anyone talking about the fact that at some point, if the money that's been invested by the venture groups in things like new medical groups, new insurance plans, new tech platforms that we've been going on about for all these years, and then putting healthcare in the home like Robin wants to do, all the rest of it, actually works, we've got to come up with some sort of rational plan to change the way that we currently fund healthcare. Meanwhile, one minor tidbit in the Philadelphia market from, I talked to Raj Agarwal this week. He's not on the show this week, but he's the bariatric surgeon at Jefferson. And he said, the electives got pretty full. And he was very, very busy in the sort of the July, August timeframe. But in the last few weeks, people who were delaying it came back. But he's actually saying the numbers of people who want something as sort of, and I don't know if you could call it as voluntary or as optional as bariatric surgery. He says that the numbers are starting to slow down again, even in their market. So, and people are scared to go back to the hospital, and maybe they're delaying stuff that could be put off for another few months or another few years, or maybe altogether. So I don't know if the elective cranking is going to, we've closed the gap. I don't know how great it's going to be for the old world hospitals, but.
Well, I think the best, the Phreesia tracking data that Commonwealth comes up with, we're down on visits about 10%. That's pretty consistent with what I'm hearing in the street. But the place that hasn't come fully back is emergency room visits, right? And they're down 25%. And given that most hospitals get 30% of their admissions from the ER, that's got to have a trickle effect. I think you're right. There's a latency to the postponed care too that people are sort of working their way through. By the way, I think it's safer to go to a hospital than it is to go to Safeway. Seriously.
I won't argue with you there, but and you can get Safeway delivered. Hello, Instacart, but it's really hard to Instacart medical care.
So guys, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago and Medicare, and it's going to be happening, I think, in the next month, are doing their ET3 program. What that is they partnered with a number of hospitals and ambulance companies. And when someone calls 911, they send the technician and the ambulance to the patient's home. And if they can take care of it then and there, they do. And so CMS is actually actively trying to completely bypass the emergency room.
Mm.
The other
that
thing
ties in with some of that, like some of this studies, the journal articles I've read recently about studying scoop and run versus treat on site, and how it was always thought that scoop and run, we save people more when we scoop and run.
No, they're realizing,
no, that's actually better.
It's much better to treat at home, a lot less expensive. And then, you know, I'm an immunocompromised patient, so I don't actually have to go into a hospital where I'm going to come out sicker. But my question, because there's a lot of people, you guys understand policy, what happened to value-based healthcare? I thought that if 30% of your patients are Medicare patients, I thought there was a date coming up in the next year or two where you actually have to practice VBHC on them. Do you guys know what happened to that, or did it just kind of like get swept under the rug?
Well,
the programs, it's not very much of the reimbursement. It doesn't really make that much difference. It's more for show than for reality.
Yeah.
and
I mean, the healthcare lobby makes the Pentagon look like homeless people. So there's very little that's going to happen quickly around trying to shove down the, you know, close to $4 trillion a year to round up the close to $4 trillion a year that gets washed through that system, because there's so many people wetting their beak trying to figure out whose beak is worth it and whose beak needs to get yanked out. It's hard. So
Ian?
Talked about on the last show, you know, the hospital want big upsides without taking big downsides. And you can't really do value-based purchasing if it's upsides, because who's going to give you the money? I mean, the savings come from somewhere.
Well, I'd say I want to drag Ian in here, but I would say that Farzad Mostashari, who now runs ALDAID, the sort of MSO putting together ACOs for independent physicians, has been very excited about pimping the latest numbers, which all show that ACOs that are based on physician groups actually do save some money, and ACOs based on hospitals don't really do that. But Ian, you were trying to get in?
Well, I mean, I think you're asking, Robin's asking a key question about whatever happened to value-based care. And the engine of value-based care has been Medicare Advantage and the measures of CMS. And what I'm hearing from a lot of the folk in the field is that how, you know, the performance indicators have a lot to do with process measures, like how are you doing the flu vaccines, blah, blah, blah. They're going to have trouble meeting those value targets. So there's a whole sub-industry around the quality police that's going sideways. But the $64,000 question is, are self-insured employers going to play value harder? And I think the jury's out. I've been on a couple of things in the last few days, learning a lot from you guys, that I think the vision that everyone's going to try and look like Kaiser is not necessarily the only game to play. It's the aggregation of what Jess and Matthew and all of you have been talking about, of these slivers of at-risk value providers who could be made to create a value-based system that disintermediates hospitals and traditional delivery. The problem is, what do you do with sick people, really sick people? And that's where this Verily coefficient company, to me, is very interesting. But if you can lay off the complex stuff through reinsurance, then you know, it's much more plausible to see a plug and play with all these little strata of value-based deals. But I'll tell you, I still maintain, I think the sum of these value strata is more expensive than just paying a premium to Kaiser.
That's probably right. Yeah, I mean, that's their old argument, right? If you slice out diabetes and this, that, and the other. And funnily enough, a couple of the companies in that space who've been well funded, I mean, Livongo Teladoc's the big one, but also just this week, Virta started going to, starting to add some other areas. But, and the other thing that's happening there, we had Jess and I have been talking about, we're noodling on a piece that we did a piece on mental health a while back, and we're noodling on a piece on primary care, which will be where she'll poke me and I'll shut up in our video. But we're noodling on a piece doing this around primary care. And, you know, you've seen there's a bunch of people who are kind of doing, you know, new primary care getting funded very well. And they may be the people who are fully capitated, like the Oak Streets and the IORA, who look like the Ian from our history from the Bristol Parks and a lot of Malakins right. in the 90s. There's a bunch of others, right, who are kind of messing into this space, who are now trying to do slices of primary care like mental health or diabetes or what have you. And some of them are offering it for very cheap. And it's obviously a trend. I mean, there was a company called Cerebral, which just raised, I mean, $35 million, and will do a mental health consult, all your meds and free texting and coaching for $95 a month. And if you want to have a regular mental health consult where I live with a regular psychologist, it's $200. So that may be a transfer from the venture capitalists to build market share, but there are a bunch of people trying to do that. Rowe and Hims are kind of doing that as well. They're kind of stepping out of their lane a little bit from just being, you know, the boner pill and the hair pill. So it's, you know, it seems to me you can start seeing people come into that space and change a little bit of what they're doing. But as you said, we still have the problem with sick people. We don't know how to manage them. And we don't really have a transition idea from all this great stuff where the venture capitalists are pouring in money to what the real world looks like. So Sachin Jain has said there's this big dichotomy between the healthcare system and the healthcare innovation system, which never talk to each other.
Yeah.
He may be right.
I think that's going to stay. I just feel like it sounds like things are getting more and more fragmented. And it's one of those like necessity is the mother of innovation. And then it's like the necessity born from chaos. Like there is just so much chaos and in terms of, you know, there's no clarity on what the policy is going to be moving forward, how that's going to trickle down into reimbursement, where that's going to trickle down to. I think like Matthew just said, it's like some of these venture capital funded things or some of these retail plays, some of these non-traditional healthcare companies who are well-funded or are willing to take the hit to grab some market share in the short term, I think we're going to see them step in a bigger way. That's just my prediction. I think, and care is going to get fragmented. And then it's like, you're going to have the hospitals and the incumbents who are going to be looking at this like, well, you know, I've got my money tied up in real estate or whatever, and my bottom line is pretty strong. So I'm going to weather through this. Others that are going to go away. And I think the bottom line here for everybody is that care is going to be piecemeal together by people for a long
more
period of time.
fragmented
How it's
system.
paid for.
Lovely prospect.
I know, right? Doesn't that sound great?
Oh, that
It
sounds so
doesn't have to
exciting. I
be.
can't wait.
We
Right.
cannot, we don't actually have to have it fragmented. I thought all of us were going to go to Walmart and get everything done from our teeth to our, you know, checkups, right?
So I occasionally have little stories. I had this one is so new. After about a year ago, Best Buy, 3 or 4 years ago, Best Buy got into healthcare. About a year ago, I got a new washing machine, and I wrote it up. The data screw ups between my old washing machine.
I remember this story.
I
This
remember
was
this
not
story
pretty.
too. Please
Okay.
do not break that
I
down.
have a new one. So I showed up. I got a flu shot this morning. I took my au pair girl for a driving test. On the way back, we stopped at CVS. I booked first CVS we stopped and didn't have any. It was advertising flu shots. Didn't have any. Second one we stopped in, I booked in, went in. I'm a Blue Shield member, and I got and they found me immediately, and I got a free flu shot. Great. She bought an au pair. She's an au pair. She gets a package from the au pair agency, which ends up she's got an Aetna card. Now we're in a CVS. She's got an Aetna card. I call they can't find her in the system.
Who's she in this?
Here's
Au
my
pair.
au pair girl who looks after my kids.
Okay.
From Colombia, right? But she's got insurance. Who owns Aetna these days? CVS,
Yeah.
right? So you'd think they were good. I call the number, but by mistake, I call the provider number, not the member number. The provider guy on the other line, he finds her in the system, but the pharmacy can't find her. I call the other number with the member number, which goes not to Aetna, but to like the weird au pair agency wraparound thing that's sold her. They eventually give me a new number. Gets me there's all this. There is 25 minutes of interoperability. In the end, what do? I pay the $40 cash. Just get her.
Who shot yourself was going to be my guess.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's little microcosms of the chaos at every point. I mean, by the way, if you believe that flu and COVID are going to interact and be a real drag, shouldn't the national policy be that everyone should get a free flu shot without any insurance bullshit? Shouldn't that be wouldn't that be a rash?
That would be the sensible approach, but since
sensible
when have
approach.
we ever been sensible in this country?
Well, I'm
Get free Regeneron. Putting a Trump.
yes, we're all getting a free experimental
A
drug.
free Regeneron, card, copay card. What? Yeah.
Yeah,
I read today that the Trump administration is still working on these $200 discount pharmacy cards, but they're going to send the letters out telling them about it before they actually give the cards out, and the cards will come sometime in the future after the election. So
this stuff is
Nice
so naked. It's so naked. And so,
Grifter's gonna grift.
it's so naked. It's so cynical. But I mean, that is true, right? The Regeneron is going to be. What did he say? He had this long spiel about how happy Trump had this long spiel about how happy he was. He took in the chin, and now he understands it. And now he's a brave leader because he.
It was a gift from God, he called it.
It was a blessing.
It was a gift from God.
well, but it's really due to his excellent physical
Yeah,
conditioning.
He can call the widow of my buddy in New York who got the gift from God. All right. And everybody else who's got long COVID. And, it's like, oh, that son of a bitch. Anyway.
Very happy.
Tell us how you really feel.
I lived in New York. I lived in New York for all the years that he was like rising in, like some kind of like weird pond scum rising through the headlines. I read all of Marie Brenner's pieces. I actually ran into him a couple of times. Boy, did I need a shower after that. And I just, I mean, I knew he was going to win in 2016 because I don't live in a bubble. I listen across, across all the, the landscape. But everybody was very upset when it turned out that I was right. And I'm like, dude, it's not like I tried. It just is. And so here we are. But he, this guy was always going to happen. But now he's here.
Now he's here. So we have a couple of weeks in which we'll start over the next couple of weeks trying to do a little bit of forecasting about whether he stays or goes, and what the Senate looks like and what have you, because we're now less than a month away. I must admit, I did a little forecast with I have a very politically union friend, and we sat in the Health Department office a couple of 4 years ago, a little bit closer to the time, and we did it and went, a couple of these states look a bit iffy, and we don't have good numbers on Michigan and Wisconsin, and you never know. Looks like Clinton should win, but I still remember that New York Times site the night going from Clinton can't lose to, oh God, she's going to lose.
Hey, Matthew, the morning of the election, I was giving a talk to the Medicaid Directors of America in Washington, D.C. And the whole first half, it's on C-SPAN 3, you can go and Google it, the whole thing. And it basically was, Hillary should win, but it could be Brexit for 20 minutes. And lo and behold.
Yes, welcome to Brexit. Yep.
All right. Okay, so that will be the forecast for a couple of weeks. Well, I will pin everyone down and say, okay, what's it going to be? The Electoral College, the popular vote. I want everyone to study up on their on their Senate seat and come up with where they think it's going to come out, because it does matter, right? And then we'll have another forecast about what the hell happens between November the 3rd and January the 20th, while chaos reigns. And as Casey says, if they know they're going, how much they're carting out the back door and what other chaos happens. But meanwhile, we've had crazy weeks. They keep getting crazier. But let's go around the horn and figure out what do we think's happening. What are we looking at? What are we expecting? What are we thinking of for the next couple of weeks? So I'll start with you, Kim.
Well, so the count now at the White House, I believe, is 38. So I'm looking to see how many more people catch it and how bad they catch it.
Robin.
So I am watching Trump on steroids. I mean, as someone with Crohn's disease, I've been on and off steroids most of my life. And let me tell you, you're not a normal person when you're on them. Like, it dramatically changes you. And you can get things like secondary bipolar, which is what it looks like he might be leaning towards right now. And so that's going to be even more unpredictable than normal.
Maybe it's tertiary syphilis. I don't know. Casey.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'd put money on that one, Matthew. I don't know. I am literally just watching this speed dating the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse thing scroll by. And I'm, making plans. And I think every American needs to make plans for what will happen after November 3rd, both for your own personal and family safety and for the safety of your community, because it's going to get wild.
All right, so you're heading down to Walmart to buy some ammo, no doubt. Jane.
Yeah, so we haven't gotten our mail ballots yet, and I'm really still worried about the post office in Pennsylvania and in my county. I'm so jealous. Please. I got my Italian.
Yeah, but you're in Pennsylvania and your vote matters. I'm in California.
My vote matters a lot. That's the point, right? So, and we really haven't heard from the Postmaster General in a while either, or Betsy DeVos on schools. So I'm kind of watching out for that. But yeah, I'm really worried about the post office right now.
Jessica.
Well, I'm living over here in the magical fairyland that is health tech investment. So I'm looking next week to see some unicorns. And because the raccoons that teach you PT got funded this week, I'm expecting some sort of chronic condition management pigeons to get funded next week.
Ian.
Well, I mean, the great British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan was asked one time, what's the hardest thing about being Prime Minister? And he said, events, dear boy, events. And I just picking up on what Jane said earlier, I mean, it goes from one surprise to another. So I'll be looking for surprises. Here's my 2 wild cards. One is that it turns out that Judge Amy's kids were the super spreaders. And what does that do to everything? And the other wild card maybe is that white supremacists actually succeed in kidnapping a blue state governor. It can't get any crazier than it's been. So just look out, Charlie.
What have you got on your bingo card for next week? You know, I think some of the stuff I've seen escape the Saturday Night Live writers' room has been really quite surprising in the last few days. All right, well, that's a wrap on this issue, this edition of the THCB Gang. We certainly had a whole lot to talk about. I really want to thank my guests, Kim Bellard from the quasi-red state of Ohio, but maybe it's in play. Jess DeMassa, host of WTF Health, Robin von Fanfanian, co-founder of Face Touch Aware, but also author of The Patient's CEO. Ian Morrison, health futurist all the way from the wild to Menlo Park. Jane Saracen-Kahn from the nice part of Philadelphia. And Casey Quinlan, Mighty Casey Media, the health activist, not health advocate, keen to point out, coming in from Richmond, Virginia. That's the end of THCB Gang for this week, episode 27. I want to again thank the THCB sponsors. I'm getting good at this. Livongo, Teladoc, GuideWell, and OneDrop. Thanks for supporting THCB and letting this to happen and paying for the lights to stay on around here. And we will be back this time next week, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern next Thursday with episode 28, where more craziness will have ensued. That's my prediction for the next 2 weeks. Bye now.